Transylvania is known as the place where many vampire stories take place. Vlad Tepes, who became the prototype of Count Dracula, once lived in these places. In this place, covered with legends, there is the Hoya Bachu Forest, which has gained fame as one of the most terrible forests in the world. This place is often called the Transylvanian Bermuda Triangle. Unexplained phenomena occur here, people often disappear, ghosts get caught on camera. Of course, skeptics do not believe in such stories. This is a place of public recreation, there are playgrounds for airsoft and archery, a bike park works. However, the Hoya Bachu Forest is spread over an area of 3,000 square kilometers. And there really are a lot of strange things happening here. We invite you to get acquainted with this anomalous zone of Romania. Back in the late 19th, early XX century, it was a very ordinary forest. A road passed through it, along which local residents went to the fair in the nearest city. There were animals and birds here, you could even hunt in these places. There is a legend that Vlad Tepes himself often came here to hunt. Locals like to walk around the picturesque surroundings around the city, with the exception of the Hoya Bachu Forest. From the very first chronicles it is known that the locals are afraid of this forest, believing that it is the gateway to another world. Mystical lights are visible at night among the trees, which there is a lot of evidence of people watching it outside the forest. When people enter the forest itself, it seems very creepy. People often experience claustrophobia or nausea when moving between trees. With immersion in the forest, the feeling that you are being watched increases. Often after visiting the forest, people found strange redness and burns on their bodies, in rare cases turning into blisters at the site of the lesion. Many thought that the result of this was a touch with some kind of plant, but after visiting the doctor, it turned out that they were mistaken. There are no plants in the forest that could cause such a reaction. Trees and other plants in this forest are also not protected from this strange phenomenon. In some areas of the forest, traces of long and slow burning appear on the trees. At the beginning of the 20th century, the forest began to change. The trees bent at the most unthinkable angles. The soil began to be covered with moss, the road began to overgrow. Then the animals disappeared from here. Perhaps they continue to live in the depths of the forest, but meetings with them have become much less frequent. Rumors began to appear about ghosts in the forest. One of the locals claimed to have seen the ghost of Count Dracula. Finally, the forest gained notoriety after the First World War. The shepherd, who had the nickname Bachu in the surrounding villages, went to the fair in the nearest town. He was driving 200 sheep for sale. He didn't come to the city. Then the inhabitants combed the whole forest, but they did not find either the shepherd or his sheep. At that time, there were already few animals here, and they could not tear apart a man and a flock of sheep. There were no robbers in that forest. This disappearance has not yet been explained, and the forest has received its modern name, Hoya Bachu. After that incident, the forest finally gained a reputation as a dangerous place. After that shepherd, a lot of people disappeared in Hoya Bachu. The locals are sure that this is the work of the dark forces that have settled in these places. However, there were realists who claimed that the missing were torn apart by wild animals. Among all these cases, two should be particularly noted, which do not fit into any assumptions. In one of the nearby villages there lived a teacher who considered all the stories about the forest to be fiction. To prove her words, she took baskets and went to the forest to pick mushrooms and berries there. A few days later she was found in a clearing. She couldn't remember anything, not even her own name. There was a case when a 5-year-old child went into the forest trying to catch a beautiful butterfly. He did not return from the forest. Inconsolable parents raised the village to search, but found no one. And 5 years later, the child came out of the forest with a butterfly caught. Less than an hour has passed for him. Of course, it was not without UFOs. There are many photos of glowing discs or balls. Even more stories about them. Some of the photos were taken back in the 1960s, and their authenticity has not yet been refuted, although there have been many attempts. In August 1968, one of the most famous events took place in the forest. The 45-year-old military technician ignored the warnings of local residents and went to the forest to spend the weekend there with his girlfriend and friends. In the afternoon, he was collecting firewood in order to light a fire at night, but he heard the screams of his friends. He returned to them and saw a low-flying, bright object that moved silently in the air just above the trees. This was neither the first nor the last UFO sighting in this forest, and throughout the 1970s, Hoya Bachu became a place visited by many UFO researchers. One famous photograph of an unidentified object hovering over the trees was taken here. Various sources claim that either Emil the Guy or Alexandra Swift took the photo. Nevertheless, most sources say that Swift took this photo. Nowadays, in connection with all these legends, the forest has begun to attract a huge number of paranormal researchers, and other people who are attracted by everything unknown. Although the locals warn them not to go into the forest, whole research groups are sent to it, hoping to stumble upon something interesting or experience the influence of the forest on themselves. In the 1960s, biologist Alexander Swift became interested in Hoya Bachu. He found out that in the middle of the forest there is a place where not even grass grows. The researcher compared the soil from this clearing and from other parts of the forest and came to the conclusion that there is no explanation for the emptiness of this clearing. He also found out that UFOs most often appear over this clearing. Paranormal researchers have been studying this forest and were able to put forward several hypotheses about the nature of what is happening. The ancient Transylvanian lands changed hands more than once. Each new ruler sought to strengthen his power through endless repression. Those days are long gone, but the negative energy has not disappeared anywhere. And everything that happens in the forest is a consequence of the presence of this very energy. And the center of its concentration is the very clearing in the middle of the forest. Another hypothesis says that the clearing is the gateway to a parallel world. People disappeared, getting into this clearing and going to a parallel world. Ghosts and UFOs also come out of there. It was the influence of the parallel world that changed the forest. It is also the cause of the disappearance of birds and animals from there. So far, neither of these two hypotheses is sound. Although paranormal researchers are still interested in the forest, they do not continue to study the forest, and its mystery will not be solved for a very long time.